Ever looked at a Tesla and wondered, like, how did this company become, synonymous with electric cars?
Hmm.
Today's deep dive is all about kind of peeling back the layers of Tesla's rise, starting with their game-changing Roadster. We've got articles, interviews, even glimpses into the world of like hardcore Tesla enthusiasts. Your source material is top-notch.
Yeah, it's really something. What I find fascinating is how Tesla's story, it isn't just about cars, right? It's a window into how innovation actually happens. The bumps in the road, the breakthroughs, those passionate communities that form around like these big ideas.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. Now, most people, they immediately think Elon Musk equals Tesla, right? But he wasn't actually the one who got the ball rolling, was he?
You're right. That's a common misconception. The real origin story, it starts with two guys named Martin Eberhard and Marc Tarpenning. And get this, before Tesla, they were already shaking things up with something called the Rocket ebook.
The Rocket ebook?
Yeah, essentially the first Kindle before, Kindle existed.
Talk about being ahead of the curve. But going from digital books to like high-performance electric cars, I mean, that seems like a pretty wild left turn.
It does, doesn't it? But it was all sparked by Eberhard's, how do I put it? This desire he had for a sports car. You see, he wanted something, fun, stylish, but also responsible, something that aligned with his growing concerns about fossil fuels.
So instead of just settling, he decided what to invent it. But wasn't the electric car landscape like pretty barren back then?
Pretty much, yeah. The prevailing thought was that electric cars, well, they just had to be slow, clunky, or, totally impractical. Eberhard and Tarpenning, though, they saw this opportunity. They wanted to completely redefine what an electric car could be.
And they were like wading into an industry dominated by these giants, right? How did they even begin to tackle that challenge?
They were smart, I'll give them that. They played to their strengths. You see, they weren't car guys, right? They were tech guys, masters of software and that whole digital experience. So their strategy was to partner with companies that could kind of fill in the gaps in, their automotive knowledge.
Ah, classic Silicon Valley move, disrupt, don't replicate. So who did they end up bringing on board for, like the heavy lifting?
They struck a deal with Lotus, Lotus,
Yeah.
known for those agile sports cars.
Yeah, yeah.
This partnership gave them access to, well, first, Lotus's manufacturing expertise, right? But crucially, their relationships with those established car part suppliers.
Which I imagine was no easy feat for like this brand new company. Weren't those traditional suppliers hesitant, to say the least, to work with Tesla back then?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Getting airbags, seatbelts, even basic components, it was a constant uphill battle.
Yeah.
Suppliers, they were used to dealing with the established players, not some startup with this, well, crazy idea.
So they're battling industry skepticism, right? Sourcing parts is a constant headache, and yet they managed to create the Tesla Roadster. And this wasn't just any electric car. This thing, it turned heads from day one.
It really did. It was a deliberate statement. They wanted to like shatter the perception that electric automatically meant compromise. The Roadster had this sleek design, a 0 to 60 time that rivaled, gas-guzzling sports cars, and a range that was basically unheard of for an EV at the time.
I bet their 2006 launch event was a sight to behold. I read it was like a who's who of Silicon Valley. Even Governor Schwarzenegger showed up. What was the vibe like?
Oh, you can imagine this room just brimming with anticipation. This wasn't just a car launch, right? It was a cultural moment. People sensed they were witnessing like the start of something much, much bigger than, just another car company.
That early buzz must have been invaluable, especially with, let's face it, all the skepticism surrounding electric vehicles back then.
Oh, absolutely. The Roadster was instrumental in shifting public opinion. Suddenly, electric wasn't just, eco-friendly. It was cool, aspirational even. And the fact that early adopters included everyone from like Google founders to the co-creator of The Simpsons, I mean, that spoke volumes.
That's so interesting how those early buyers, they weren't just customers, right? They were like walking, talking endorsements.
Exactly. It's a key aspect of Tesla's journey, really the power of a dedicated community. Those early Roadster owners, they were like these passionate advocates. They were organizing rallies, sharing their experiences online, actively countering, any negative press.
They were like pioneers, paving the way for the EV movement we see today. Speaking of pioneers, we have to talk about Carl Medlock, the Roadster Whisperer. This guy, he dedicated his career to keeping these, what are they now, these rare cars on the road.
Medlock's story, it's fascinating because it really highlights the emotional connection people develop with these cars. You see, he wasn't just fixing machines, he was preserving pieces of history.
And his timing was perfect. As Tesla moved on to, newer models, Roadster owners were kind of left wondering, like, who's going to keep our beloved cars running?
Exactly. Parts were becoming scarce. Tesla service centers, they were ill-equipped to handle the aging Roadsters. And that's where Medlock stepped in, turning his shop into this haven for these electric relics.
I read he'd travel the globe sourcing parts from salvaged Roadsters. That level of dedication, it's remarkable, especially considering how much the Roadster's value has, skyrocketed.
It really is. Medlock's dedication is even more remarkable considering this shift, right, from practicality to investment.
Mm.
Those who recognize the Roadster's significance early on, I mean, they're sitting on a gold mine now.
We're talking six-figure sums now. Some Roadsters are fetching prices that rival those of classic sports cars. It's incredible how this little startup with, let's be honest, zero automotive experience, created something so collectible.
It speaks to Tesla's ability to tap into, well, this desire for something truly different, right?
Yeah.
Something that embodies both performance and progress.
Mm.
This passion for early Teslas, especially the Roadster, it underscores a defining characteristic of the company, this relentless drive to push boundaries. And that's where their self-driving technology comes into play.
Which, brings us to, the elephant in the room, or, well, I guess the autopilot in the car, right? Tesla's full self-driving beta, better known as FSD Beta, and it's been generating headlines, though not always for the reasons Tesla might hope.
Yep.
So what's the deal with FSD Beta, and why is it causing such a stir?
Well, I think it's important to understand that, despite its name, FSD Beta, it isn't actually about, full autonomy, at least not yet. It's more accurately described as like a highly advanced driver assistance system. Think of it as a suite of features that are designed to, assist with things like lane keeping, adaptive cruise control, even navigating, those tricky city streets. The catch, of course, is that it's still under development, right?
Right.
And it requires constant driver supervision.
And it's that under development part that's got people talking, right? Tesla's decided to just go ahead and test this technology on public roads using their own customers as beta testers. That's a pretty bold move, to say the least.
It's certainly a unique approach. Tesla's argument is that, by gathering data from real-world driving scenarios, right,
Yeah.
with all their complexities and unpredictability, that this allows them to accelerate the development process.
Mm-hmm.
However, not surprisingly, this approach, it's drawn a lot of criticism,
Right.
both from regulators and safety advocates
Right.
who believe that this approach, it exposes the public to, unnecessary risks.
Yeah, I can definitely see both sides of the coin here. On one hand, it's exciting to think about technology, evolving at such a rapid pace. But on the other hand, I totally get why people might be wary of becoming, unwitting test subjects in some multi-ton experiment.
Exactly. And that's the crux of the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is Tesla really, pushing the boundaries of innovation? Or are they playing fast and loose with public safety? The technology, it's evolving at this breakneck speed, but the ethical and legal frameworks, right, that surround it, they're still trying to catch up.
Speaking of catching up, we watched that CNBC piece where they followed, a Tesla owner who was using FSD Beta in New York City.
Yeah.
Talk about a stress test. Even he admitted to feeling his anxiety levels spike while the system was engaged.
And that's in the hands of someone, right, who understands the technology and more importantly, its limitations. So, imagine the potential for danger when it's, the average driver, someone who might, misinterpret the system's capabilities behind the wheel.
And that CNBC segment, it highlighted several instances where FSD Beta really struggled, like slamming on the brakes for pedestrians who weren't even, crossing the street, getting confused at intersections, even running a red light. It seemed like those bollards were public enemy number one.
It is a good illustration, I think, of how FSD Beta, while impressive in its ability to handle, many driving tasks, it still struggles with what we might call, common sense scenarios.
Right.
Those bollards you mentioned, for example, they represent this spatial challenge that the system's sensors and algorithms are still learning to interpret consistently.
It's clear that FSD Beta is still a work in progress, which makes the name Full Self-Driving feel just a tad premature, don't you think?
I think it's safe to say that the name itself has been a point of contention. to say the least. Critics argue that it creates this false sense of security. It can lead drivers to overestimate the system's capabilities and potentially disengage from the driving task when they really shouldn't.
And then there's the whole, like, the lack of transparency surrounding the program. CNBC pointed out that it's really unclear how Tesla, like, vets drivers for the FSD Beta program or how they monitor their driving behavior once they're in.
Right, and that's a valid concern. Right now, it's largely up to Tesla to determine, who is a safe and responsible enough driver to be entrusted with this beta software. There's very little external oversight or standardized testing involved.
So we've got this potent mix, right, of cutting edge technology, a dash of like Wild West experimentation, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. What does this all mean for the average driver who might be wondering if they'll ever need to get behind the wheel again?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it's a question without a simple answer. The technology is evolving rapidly, but there are still significant hurdles to overcome, both technological and ethical. The dream of fully autonomous vehicles, seamlessly navigating our roads, it's still a long way off. But the journey towards that future, well, it's proving to be anything but dull.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? I mean, we're on the cusp of this like transportation revolution, yet here we are still grappling with, the most fundamental questions of safety and responsibility.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective. It reminds us that these technological advancements, they don't just exist in a vacuum, right? They're inevitably intertwined with human behavior, societal expectations, ethical considerations, all of it.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a shiny new future, especially one where, our cars drive themselves, but we can't lose sight of the potential pitfalls along the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, ironing out the technical kinks. We need to be asking ourselves, I think, bigger questions like who really benefits most from this technology? What are the potential downsides for those who might not have access to it or who are just, fundamentally uncomfortable with this idea of relinquishing control to a machine?
Yeah. It's like we're writing the rules of the road as we go, which, I mean, can be both exhilarating and a little unnerving at the same time.
And it's not just Tesla, right? I mean, the entire automotive industry, they're grappling with these very same questions as automation. Well, as it just becomes, increasingly sophisticated. We're on the verge of like a seismic shift in how we think about transportation and the ramifications. Well, they'll be felt far beyond the open road.
It's a lot to process, but before we get too lost in the existential implications of self-driving cars, maybe we can circle back to something we touched on earlier, that passionate community that's rallied around Tesla, right? It seems like Tesla's tapped into something kind of unique, this sense of shared purpose, the belief that they're not just building cars, but actually shaping the future.
It's a crucial point. Tesla's success, I mean, it wasn't solely driven by, engineering prowess. They understood the power of community, right? Of creating a sense of belonging, this shared excitement, around their products. Those early Roadster owners, they weren't just buying cars. They were buying into a vision.
They were pioneers. They were willing to like overlook flaws, champion the technology, even, forgive the occasional bollard collision, all in the name of progress. It makes you wonder what will Tesla think of next? I mean, they've already shaken up the automotive industry. What other industries or technologies might they disrupt in the future?
It really is an exciting question, and perhaps even more importantly, it asks us to consider the kind of future we want when it comes to to transportation, to automation, to the role technology plays in our lives.
Yeah. Do we embrace these advancements wholeheartedly, or do we proceed with caution, mindful of the potential downsides, the ethical dilemmas? It's a balancing act for sure.
One thing is certain though, Tesla and the electric vehicle revolution, they helped ignite. It's here to stay. The technology, it's only going to get more sophisticated, more accessible, and more integrated into our daily lives. The road ahead, it's sure to be full of twists and turns, but the journey Well, the journey promises to be anything but boring.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this electrifying deep dive into the world of Tesla. It's been a wild ride through, technological leaps, passionate communities, and some very, very big questions about the future of driving. Until next time, keep those wheels turning both literally and figuratively.